Hi everyone, I'm Chris Karpiak and I'm working with Graphic Arts today, and today we are going to make some mantra cards. And before we talk about anything, underneath here is this incredible artboard, and that's actually what it's called, the incredible artboard, because it holds water when you're working with watercolor and watercolor paper, and that's what I've got here. So to start this project off, you want to put it on your board or something like it, and you can just use one page of watercolor paper, or you can just use some scraps that you have lying around like I had here, and just randomly adding some colors here and there. This is just a background, maybe deciding what your color palette's going to be, and then taking some water-soluble pastels and just making some fun little marks so that it bleeds into the wet watercolor. And when they're all dry, you might want to trim them up into the size that you want your cards to be. And mine are approximately 5 inches by 3 inches, give or take, because some of my papers were not all exactly the right size, but that's okay for me. And depending on how many cards you make, you want to just display them out on your table, find some text, some vintage text, some dictionary paper like I have here, and just tear some pieces and place them on your cards that we will adhere in a minute. I like to use gel medium, but you can use whatever you want to adhere your paper. You just want to make sure there's no bubbles if possible, and you can avoid that by using a plastic card and just squishing it down and going over top with some more gel medium. And then let's add some white acrylic paint, and I'm using this brand new spatula that I have here, this brand new palette knife, but certainly you can use whatever you want. You can use a catalyst tool, you can use a plastic card, you know, whatever you have kicking around. You could also just even use a brush. I just wanted the marks on here to be not so precise and a little bit, you know, varied. Before the paint is dry, it's fun to etch in there with a pencil or some kind of mark making tool. And then that'll just add a little bit of texture to our final product. Now let's try some matte adhesive backed film for inkjet printers. And you'll see here that I've printed 2 of the exact same pages onto that film. And it's thick, it's wonderful. It's like a giant sticker essentially. And you can see that the images have printed out very, very well. So whenever you've printed your images out, you just want to cut them out because we're going to be obviously adhering those to our cards. Now it doesn't have to be flowers, it can be anything you want, but for me I just wanted to go with some flowers. When you're placing them onto your card, you don't want to place it right in the middle, because putting it off to the side like that just sort of is a little bit more interesting for the eye. Now let's add actually some splatters with our black acrylic ink before we actually adhere our focal points, because we just want to give a little bit of contrast going on there. And I would say if you add them in the opposite corners there, that's going to be just fine and have a great little look and just give it a little bit of extra detail. Once that ink has dried, take your focal points and, you know, mix them up from card to card and see what you think looks the best. Maybe you just want one focal point on a card, maybe you want a couple. And then when you're ready, you peel. It's like a sticker, like I said, and look what you're left with. It's thick, it's sticky, it looks three-dimensional, the color has held, and you just stick it on. And I think I am obsessed with this product. It's absolutely beautiful, it behaves beautifully, and as you can see, it just does a fantastic job of the printing. And this one's kind of cool because you can see some of the text and some of the things underneath, and that I love that. I love that how it's just coming through the flower, and maybe the folding over is a little bit too thick to fold over, as it's quite sturdy material, so we'll just cut off the edge. You can see how wonderfully this actually just peels off without tearing, because everything is nice and thick with this film. This one as well, you can see some faint blotches and text showing through, and I think that just adds really to the interest there. To make these cards look a bit more finished and polished, let's take some black archival ink and just kind of smudge it around the corners ever so slightly. Just gives it a little really faint little border. If you like, and this part's optional, you can take a black Stabilo pencil and very, very lightly just trace right around the outside of your focal point, the object that you've printed and cut out. That will give it a little bit of a shadow. It might help it look like it's not just sort of sitting on top, floating around. But again, like I say, it's totally optional. And then just go over the marks with an aqua brush or a wet paint brush. Now let's hop over to this clear film for inkjet printers. Again, this one is not adhesive, but it comes out so very well. And I've just printed off some mantras here on this page, which I'm going to just cut out into strips, and we're going to apply those strips right onto our mantra card. Position it where you want it, and if you have a very small hole punch, this will be perfect for this project. And then we'll just attach a little brad and just hold that plastic in place. And here they are, the beautiful cards with these mantras that you can read to yourself or read them out loud. And as you go through these cards, enjoy this beautiful artwork that you created along with your cards. It's so very therapeutic, and it's just such a healing and a beautiful thing to do. Now, a few last optional steps are if you wanted to add some shrink film. And this shrink film comes in gold and silver, and today we're going to use the silver. And what you want to do on this film is draw an image, a simple image. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. I would not recommend using a stamp because the stamp ink just really doesn't dry unless you want to try using a stays-on pad. But I think to have drawing with your own hand really just makes it a little bit more artistic and has your own flair to it. You'll want to cut out each individual image, and you want to be sure to add a hole into each of the images as we will be hanging them with some thread. Place them on some parchment paper and throw them in your oven. About 320 degrees Fahrenheit I find is the best. Not even a minute, and ta-da! We have these absolutely gorgeous, sweet little tags that we can use in any of our projects, and it's such a fun thing to do. For our very final step, let's use some craft plastic. This plastic is fantastic. It's really thick, incredibly sturdy. It comes back with some tissue paper, and we are going to use it today to make a little envelope to just hold those beautiful mantra cards that we're making. Cut this to whatever size you think fits with your cards, and leave enough room for the cards to slide in and out too. Give it a fold, although it won't really hold the fold as it's so thick, but you would just kind of want to know where now to make the little holes on the side. And I'm just taking a Sharpie and made little holes and taken my baby hole puncher again and went along that pattern so that we will be stitching in it. Make sure you do that to both sides. Now we've got some leftover images, maybe you will as well, and maybe it will be fun to put a little bit of an image on the back of our envelope before we sew it together. I'm thinking if we put something on the front, it will shield us seeing our beautiful cards. So I think the front will just leave clear. And on the back, looks good. And you can even see it very faintly through the front, which is so cool. Okay, let's get sewing. Let's sew those sides together. I'm using embroidery floss, but really you can use whatever you want and you can make your sewing holes as big as you want. Maybe you want to use some wool or some different kind of threads. It really doesn't matter. I would say tie 2 or 3 knots when you first start because you don't want it to come loose. And then literally it's just so simple. You're taking your needle, you're going underneath and up, bringing it back around to the bottom and just poking it up. And that just sort of like makes a little bit of a zigzag pattern. Now, if you want to make a different kind of pattern on yours, that is totally fine. So when you come to the very last stitch, make a couple of knots, 2 or 3 again, but don't cut the thread off because we can use it to tie on our flowers. These are just really fun little elements that you could add to anything, not even just this envelope. But I thought this envelope, since it was clear, you know, maybe we want to do something fun and add a little bit of extra dimension to it. And here they are in our envelope. I think it looks so cute, and I love that it's see-through and we can see our cards. And you know, it just looks really happy there. They fit in nicely. I've left lots of space so the cards can slide in and out. There's the flower on the back again. And we can put this anywhere we want and refer to our cards anytime we want, and we can see the beauty. I really, really hope you enjoy making this project and giving it a go. It's very therapeutic to come up with the mantras, but also to do the artwork and play with some really, really fun and really great materials. Thank you so much for joining me once again. I'm Chris Karpiak, working with Grafix. Take care, you. We will see you soon.